engage, reflect, laugh, get comfortable, be you, relax and chill, sweatpants and coffee chat, freshly brewed, nice and hot, come sip, let's chat.
Hello, friends. Welcome to the season finale of Sweatpants and Coffee Chat.
Hi, guys. So excited to be here.
This has been such a regular thing that it's so weird that today is our final episode of the season. Not to worry, though. We will be back in the fall. But today's a really special day because today we just want to take an opportunity to cover a topic that is near and dear to our hearts.
Definitely.
And we really just want to kind of unpack and unload men's mental health and the part that we play as women and as the queens in their lives, as the sisters in their lives, as the friends in their lives. How do we elevate and amplify their best selves, right? Their full selves, their authentic selves, so that way not only they are equipped and successful in everyday life and dealings and relationships, but even, when they're, internally, just within themselves, they're feeling strong, they're feeling built up, they're feeling believed in. Because I think oftentimes that term can just, can grow an opinion of itself when it comes to what mental health really means, what mental health looks like in our men. And then again, we have this expectation, but how do we support that process? I think that's really important. We talk a lot about the accountability of us as their partners and as their friends and
sisters, moms,
every experience.
Yeah,
I agree.
So today we have two great panelists and some great people who've come onto our show to help us actually unpack this idea. We have Sassy, the CEO of Sassy Sa Entertainment. Hi.
Oh, hello.
And we also have Janelle Thompson, who is a therapist, and she is the owner of Simply Redefining LLC. Hi. Thank you guys for being here with us today. I appreciate both of you.
Thank you for having me. Thank you guys. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, no problem. So I just want to start off with just some basics about how we, can kind of see these things in our, brothers and our significant others, husbands and stuff like that. So Janelle, I want to kick off to you. And what are some ways that men kind of show that they're struggling with their mental health to begin with, so that we could kind of help them, guide them to getting better or, feeling good about themselves?
Yeah, so off the bat, I will say men just kind of sometimes don't vocalize it, right? And so maybe you're seeing it in action. You're seeing it in body language. You're seeing it in what they're coping with, right? And so it may be taking on negative what we might call negative coping skills to deal with something. Feeling stressed all the time, right? Men tend to feel stress and exemplify that in maybe their anger, right? Maybe they're responding to conversation, feeling overwhelmed and not having a place to actually voice that concern, voice that issue, voice that problem, and just kind of maybe even ghosting. Ghosting is a thing. Or shutting down altogether, disconnecting, not wanting to have conversations. Those are some ways that you will see mental health issues show up in men, especially because men are struggling with depression, struggling with anxiety, struggling with stress, right? And they're not vocalizing that stress sometimes, whether it's because of toxic masculinity or it's because of just the culture in their home and family.
That's a good point. Yeah. Sassy, what do you think is the stigma around men's mental health? Why is there such a stigma regarding it? Why do you think there even is one to begin with?
Well, I think when it comes to our men, us as women, we hold them accountable for so much, right? So they are supposed to be our protector, our provider. So I feel like when it comes to men, and they feel like they're not living up to our expectations or whatever the case may be, it's harder for them to express that they're feeling a type of way or that they're having issues because we hold them to such high standards. So, for them, it's kind of like, they're battling within themselves, so it's hard for them to vocalize. And like you said, you know, they do things different. So they might start drinking, or they might start they might disengage. So there's many reasons as to why. I mean, I feel that they, you know, it's like the whole mental health stigma in itself is something that we're starting to embrace, right? We're starting to normalize it. Before it was like, oh, mental health, you have an issue, or oh, well, we don't have an issue. I know I come from a Caribbean background, and it's like that is just swept under the rug. You don't have an issue, just pray, you know, and that's that. So it's now that we're starting to normalize it, and we're starting to say, you know what, it is okay to not be okay. So I feel like with the men, because us as women hold them accountable so much, it's harder for them to vocalize what it is that they're feeling internally.
That's very true. I agree. Definitely. It's a lot. It's a lot for one person to be all of that. I know as a woman, it's a lot for us to be so many different things. So I can only imagine it being the same for them, because we do put them, you know, responsible for things just as much as we're responsible for certain things as well. So I guess, yeah, that's a good point for sure. Janelle, I guess what makes this time in our society or in the world right now, what makes this time different? Why do we feel like we need to address the situation right now, like in this moment of what's happening right now?
Yeah, I'm gonna actually read off some stats to you guys. I think that these stats are super powerful. These are numbers as of 2020, right? And so I'm gonna read off some stats to you guys about just men's mental health. 1 in 10 men experience depression and anxiety. So just think about how many men in your family there are, right? Your family circle, right? 1 in 10 are experiencing depression and anxiety,
Wow.
right? Let that sit in. Less than 50% of those men who are struggling with mental health actually seek treatment.
Mm-hmm.
So less than 50% of the men that actually are struggling with these symptoms are actually in treatment, getting help, whether that's with a mental health therapist, right? Some form of therapy, whether it's group therapy, right? Or even just talking to their friends about it. And then 6 out of 10 men are actually going to go through some form of trauma in their lives. And that number, I think, is probably even higher at this point, just because of everything we've experienced in the span of the last year with COVID,
Right.
with police brutality, just the climate, right? And so, in the last statistic I have for you guys is, in high-income countries, men are 3 times more likely to die by suicide than women.
Mm-hmm.
Which says that men are, because when we think about people that actually commit suicide, right? They're not necessarily, most people that actually go ahead and actually go through with the plan have not spoken to someone, right? And so we're thinking about what it means to not be able to have a voice in your home, have a voice in your workplace around your friends, and how that is leading to a piece of you just feeling like, I can't be here no more. It's too much, right? And I think if we just take a step back and think about everything that we've experienced in the past year, it's been overwhelming. It's been overwhelming for men, especially men of color, right, to be safe in their own community. It's been hard for them to get behind the wheel of their car without feeling traumatized in some way. Even if they haven't had that experience, but they've seen it, right? We have vicarious trauma that we see things on the media happen all the time, and then we pick that up. And so that's not even talking about the things that are actually happening to them directly, right? But then this is just media and being in media and hearing everything. Social media has taken over our lives.
Yeah.
And so that's a whole other ballgame, right? So I think all of those stats is what makes this a conversation now. And I think it's a difference because before, I would say a lot of times in school systems, we weren't talking about social and emotional health. We weren't talking about SEL as, you know, that's what they're teaching in schools now and giving language to some of the things, self-awareness, right? We're having conversations around self-awareness. What does that even mean? What does that look like? Self-acceptance. What does that even look like? So those conversations are happening a lot younger, but they weren't happening before. And so a lot of men now don't have language, one, and don't have vocabulary to express. And that's one of the first things that they have to kind of learn coming in. So, when we talk about trauma, like I've shared with you guys a little bit earlier, a lot of times, sometimes when we're in a counseling session that asks that question in intake, have you had any traumatic experiences happen? They're like, no, right? And then like 5 sessions down the line, we're talking about something, and I have to identify that as trauma, whether it was a micro trauma or it was a complex trauma that has happened, and it happened multiple times in their life.
Right. I was just going to ask if you can actually just define that word, because I think that, to Sassy's point, I think depending on your background and just within the Black community, certain words are so taboo and they have such a negative connotation. So when you use a word like mental health, or when you use a word like trauma to someone, it's automatically perceived as these, grand events like physical abuse, or like, being assaulted by a police officer. But being spoken down to as a 5-year-old in a classroom is a traumatic event that can have a lasting impact. Not being given a fair opportunity as your siblings is you know what I mean? Some of those things have lasting impacts. And I think, and I'll just allow you to, like, just if you could just define what the word trauma means for folks, or from a clinical perspective, because I think that oftentimes folks just write it off as though, well, no, I don't have any trauma. I'm fine. I'm good. Because culturally we're taught to just dust it off. That's life. Just be good. But it doesn't mean that it doesn't have an impact or create a trigger almost for you, and you cool until you're not anymore. And then everybody's wondering, well, what just happened here?
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah. So trauma is so simple. It's like I'm going to give a real simple definition for y'all. A deeply distressing event. Like you literally was in distress and disturbed by what happened. Something disturbed you. Something disturbed your childhood development process. Something disturbed your thinking process, right? In your marriage, something disturbing happened that now causes you to have triggers, right? So we have, and there's different types of trauma. You have chronic trauma, you have acute trauma, then we have complex trauma, right? So all those 3 different types of trauma, one starting on the lower end, right? It happens, right? And maybe you got rubbed the wrong, like let's take childhood. Something happened in childhood with one of your friends, right? Or a parent or a teacher spoke to you, like you said, in the wrong way. Now you were deeply disturbed by that, and now every time as a kid, as you grow up, you have struggles, right? Maybe expressing yourself, because every time you get ready to express your health, you have this voice in your head that's a parent or a teacher of what was said to you that was disturbing you the last time to speak up. Trauma, micro trauma, right? Then we have things that might have been a terrible event, whether it was a rape, right? Or it was a death in a family, right? That can be traumatic. Right. And then we have complex trauma when things are happening consistently back to back to back to back. And there's no recovery period. And so now you just lumped all of that together, right? And you might like, all right, I'm good, but you're really not. And so there is really small things that build up over time. And then you have things that just happen, like because it was a national disaster, right? A natural disaster happened. That's traumatic.
Like COVID.
Yeah.
Like right? I think a lot of the times when we talk about COVID, everyone lost something in COVID.
Right.
A lot of what I started off with teaching in therapy, and my specialty was bereavement therapy actually. And I talk about like loss in a way that it's not just a physical, literally losing someone physically, but we have ambiguous loss. We have loss of time. We have loss of expectations, loss of things that we wanted. So COVID, everyone experienced loss. Even if you didn't lose someone physically, your whole world shifted.
Yeah.
And it's been like 24 to 48 hours for most people.
Right.
And something was lost. And now even going back to kind of, resuming life, we still lost something. Like we're like, all right, I'm trying to readjust, right, to being back open with people.
Yeah.
It's traumatic.
Yeah. That's very true.
And if you're a person that needed people, it's even more traumatic. If you're a person that's an extrovert and out there, COVID actually took that piece away from you, so you didn't have as much interaction. That's traumatic.
Or the exact opposite.
Yeah.
Sassy, if you could elaborate on that, what do you mean by that?
I say that because I know for me personally,
Yeah.
I'm a homebody. So when COVID hit, it was kind of like, oh, this is great, like, okay,
Me
now
too.
like it was like normal to me. But then after a while, when the world starts to open back up, you're kind of like, whoa, I gotta go back
Yeah.
outside. Like, oh,
Yeah.
now you gotta socialize. Oh, now you gotta engage with people when you haven't had to in so
And
long.
such
You
a
know what
way.
I mean?
Yeah.
So you could be an extrovert and it hurt you, or you were impacted by COVID because now you can't socialize, you can't go outside, you can't be that social butterfly. But then on the flip side, if you're someone like me, it's kind of like now you gotta normalize going back outside. You gotta normalize that things that are opening back up. You gotta normalize that, it's not just takeout. You might have to dine in, and everything is going back to normal. So
Yeah.
again, going back to what you said, trauma could come in any form or fashion. It doesn't have to be something huge as death. It doesn't have to be traumatic as a rape or something like that. But it's crazy because to me, I feel like it's the little things from like little and different situations that make up the bigger impact. You know what I mean? Because at least if it's like, let's say it's a car accident, you're scared to get behind the wheel or whatever the case may be. I feel like at least for the therapist or whoever you're talking to, it's kind of easier to pinpoint exactly what it is, break that down, and make you feel okay again with whatever your situation is. But when it's a whole bunch of little things that you didn't even acknowledge, or you didn't even think was traumatic, or you didn't even think was
Mhm.
a stressor, and like you said, you'll have your first session. Did you go through anything traumatic? And they're like, oh no, I'm normal. Da, 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 da. 5 sessions in, you're realizing, oh, your mother died when you were 10.
Yeah.
Oh, you lost your father, or your father wasn't in your life. You know what I mean? So like things start to unpack. And then at this point, as the specialist or the therapist, now you're like, okay, now we got to break this down and break this down and break this down and break this down. So not to say, it's easier or one is better than the other, but those little things that people ignore kind of make up a bigger situation that's harder to break down. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
that's fair. Yeah, that's fair to say for sure. And it's definitely something like I didn't know that until therapy, where it was like in the beginning you're just like, I just been kind of sad, and you're like, I don't know why, and then you start to realize, oh, this is why, this is why, this is why. So it does make sense.
Mm-hmm.
Or when it starts to show up in
In
everyday
other
life,
ways. Mhm.
you're having difficulties at work, you're having difficulty communicating with your spouse, you're fighting with people, you're constantly finding yourself in conflict or agitated easily. And then at that point,
Yeah.
once it becomes offensive to someone else or something else and it puts something at stake, it seems like that's the point in which, it gets dealt.
Yeah, for sure. So, Janelle, what are some things that we as like sisters, significant others, wives, girlfriends, friends, stuff like that, what can we do to kind of like help or, well, not, because we want to be very mindful not to enable and not to kind of sugarcoat it, I guess you could say, that like this behavior is okay and stuff like that. Obviously, it's not always going to be that simple. What are some ways that we could kind of help someone, a man that is struggling right now?
I would say one, we have to think about our words, right? And how we're expressing certain things, how we're vocalizing certain things, and pay attention to body language, right? So if you ask your brother, your partner, right, a friend how they're doing, and in their body language, it kind of seems opposite to what they're saying. And they're like, I'm all right, right? One, all right is not a feeling, right? And so I think trying to give English to something, and I think that's the joy too of coming into some form of therapeutic work is like getting language, getting emotional language to what's happening. Because feeling distraught, feeling sad, feeling overwhelmed, those are emotions, right? But sometimes we may not actually know how to vocalize it. And so if you just notice in terms of body language when you're asking questions, or maybe I just had an argument with a partner, right? And it's like really things are not where they're at in the span of a day or 2 days. It's not like it's coming back to like regular. I think try to understand where the person is at with giving words, right? And so if you have more emotional vocabulary, because like I said, 9 times out of 10, sometimes men are less likely to have the emotional vocabulary to express how they feel. As women, we're always talking about our emotions and feelings, right? for the most part to our friends and families. And so if you have language, give the language, right? Like, ask instead of saying what happened really, right? You can kind of start and say, are you feeling overwhelmed? Are you feeling like what based upon what you know about the situation? And then ask, how can I support? Right? Or what do you need right now? Right?
Like, what do you need? Space? Do you need time?
You
Or
need
what do you
time, you need to go hang out with your boys, you need to like, what do you need right now? Right? I
Right.
think like because sometimes we just insert ourselves. But like what do you actually
You
need
need
right
this.
Right.
now? Yeah,
Right. We are the help. We are
We've
the
been
help.
telling you, you need this.
right.
I'm gonna make you some tea. You're
Right.
gonna be
Yeah,
fine.
exactly. But not that doesn't always help. Like what do they actually need? Right? And I would also say like what is their love language? If they're your brother, your partner, like what's their love language? Lead with that. Lead with the comfort piece first, right? And sometimes that comfort will then open up to what's really happening for them to actually speak to you about what's going on.
That's good.
That's a good one. Yeah,
That's
that's
good.
good.
And
Sassy, how about you? What do you think?
I would say normalize it. Normalize the fact that being okay is not okay. Let's
Yes.
make let's take off so much of the pressure that society has put on our men of having to be this and having to be that and having to have all of your stuff together. Let's normalize like okay, it's okay that you're not okay. Let me give you a minute, like she said. What do you need? If you need space, you need to go chill out with your boys. Let's normalize the conversation because yes, it's becoming mental health is more on the forefront in our society, but you got to understand for the men it's still difficult for them because as men they're not emotional creatures by nature. Like you might have your
Yeah.
few, but most of them have, and it's a sense of pride that you have to have it together. So I feel like normalizing the conversation of it not being of you not being okay. I feel like you said, we need to give them their space and we need to talk to them. Like I feel like we need to give them their roses while they're here and just normalize saying, you know what, you might be struggling over here, but you bomb at this. You know what I mean? Or thank you for this. Or just giving them the accolades where we know they're succeeding just so that they don't feel like they're failing across the border. Just because you're failing in this, you're failing in everything. You know what I mean? Let's clap a little louder in this area just to take away from that until you're ready to deal with that.
Yeah. If we could stay right there, because it's so funny because you literally just took the thoughts right out of my head. And I'm like, it's one thing to constantly, because sometimes I think I hear asking the right questions, but then I also hear like there's a need to edify because if we even think about our children, right? Or we think about, for myself, like, I'm an educator, right? So when I think about like our young boys, like sometimes edifying, for example, if you have a child in the classroom and they're constantly doing the wrong thing, the way we can do this is two things. We could constantly address the bad behavior, or we can edify the good behavior. And to your point, I think even with our men, giving roses when we can, acknowledging those highlights and I know that, from conversation with you, Sassy, that this is something that you're really passionate about. So we can talk about that a little bit. Like, how do we do a better job at celebrating our men, at elevating and amplifying the dope things that are going on beyond, I remember you said to me when we were chatting, there's Father's Day and then that's it. Like, at what other opportunities do we have that we create where we are celebrating and amplifying their voices, their name, the good things that they're doing? So how do we do a better job at that?
So, like you said, when we had our conversation or when we spoke, I mentioned that one of the things that my organization does is we have an annual ceremony where we honor men of color in the community, and that event was inspired by the passing of Nipsey. And I say that because when he died, everybody was like, "Oh my God," you know what I mean? But for me personally, it was kind of like I didn't really know about all that he did for the community, how he was for his people, how he gave back to the hood. Like he didn't learn. I'll speak for myself. I didn't know that he was that into like the community and the give back until he passed. And I feel like that's unfortunate because a lot of men out here are doing amazing things, are doing dope things for the community, for our youth, and just because but we wouldn't know it because the way society paints our men is that they're criminals, they're drug dealers, they're locked up. Like it's a negative notion over men of color that I feel like we need to change narrative. So, you know, that's why I'm a advocate for clapping for them as loud as we can. I'm an advocate for giving them their roses while we can, because they need that. They need, like, just being a male in general is hard. At being a man of color, like, it's a lot that they carry on just by the color of their skin. And then we as women, we want you to be this, and we want you to do that, and we want you to, you know what I mean? And then you got to go to work, and you got to do this, and you got to be a great father. You got to. So there's a lot that they carry just on a daily basis, just from the time they were born, that they weren't even aware of. So I feel like us as women, yes, you want our men, your man, to be a protector and a provider and all these good things. And you know, nobody's perfect. We're not perfect. So it's kind of like I said, you gotta encourage them in a way that you know is gonna boost their sentiments and boost their egos and give them a sense of pride to, you know, keep going, to motivate them, to empower them. So I feel like that's what you need to do. Like, cook his favorite meal, you know, take him out to dinner, or be like, you know what, don't worry about it. Go hang out with your boys. Like, do whatever it is you need to do. I got the kids, or you know what I mean. Like, sometimes they need that. As women, we're the emotional beings. So 99, like most of the time in relationships, the man is trying to cater to us because they say happy wife, happy life. Right. So they try to make sure we're okay, so that they're okay. But sometimes we need to flip the switch on them. And I don't know if you guys know one of Usher's songs. It's like Trading Places. I mean, that's a sexual conversation. I mean, song or whatever. But it's just think of that. Think of the idea of which, you know, he's just presenting in that song. Like, let's trade places. Let's see how it is to walk in the footsteps of a man on a daily basis. It's a lot. And put a black man on top of that, it's a lot. So sometimes we need to just, you know, be the one to cater and be like, you know what, just do you today, this, that, and the third. And, you know, clap them, encourage them to keep going. Like, you might fall short here, but yo, your steak is bomb. The rice was a little foggy, but
yeah.
that you'd be surprised how hard they go once they realize, oh shoot, she realized that, you know. And they be like, oh, she really peeped game. So and it's hard for men to really be like, oh, why don't you just, you know, show me some love or tell me you love me, this, that, and the third. Like, not a lot of men is gonna vocalize. When you do it, you will definitely see the switch in their behavior, their tone, their actions, and it really helps build them up. So again, I'm an advocate for, you know, catering and, you know, clapping for them and acknowledging them and giving them their roses while they're still here. It's super important. And it's the little things that count. You know, it's the little things that make up a big deal. Just like in life, it's the little things that you don't notice it or you don't really pay attention to it until you're an adult and you're like, and your girl's like, yo, you have no type of emotion. Like, you don't know, you know what I mean? Like, it's those little things, and then you realize it's from your upbringing. So it's the same sense when you flip it. Like, those little words of encouragement, that little clap, that little, oh, do you, or, oh, you did great here, or, oh, that's bomb, you know what I mean? Like, that goes a long way, too. So any little thing, like, it doesn't even have to be like a grand gesture and pulling out roses, you know what I mean? But the little stuff will go a long way, and I feel like that goes for both male and female. But as women, we need to just stop and acknowledge that sometimes, more often than not.
I agree. That's a good one. I like that a lot. To give the roses.
I like clap as loud as you can.
Because I want you to clap for me. So
right.
And I think we only think about things like that, like when we think about children, but you know, deep down inside, like, you know, we're all this little person inside of us that just, we want that level of like edification. We want to know that people are proud of us. We want to know, because we're self-critical of ourselves. We're constantly wondering, are we doing the right thing, saying the right things, being the right thing? So I agree with you. Clap as loud as you can, you know, when you can, because
tomorrow's not promised.
And he may not, to your point, if they don't have the language, as Janelle mentioned, or as Sassy mentioned, if they're not expressing it, you don't know what they're battling with in their own minds that they're not outwardly discussing. And I think this even came up in an episode when you think about even relationships to like your spouse. I mean, when it's not normalized, when you small, you know, how you feeling, you know, it's just like, stop crying. You know what I mean?
Yeah. They don't know how to act when you are crying. Why? They don't know how to deal with the emotion that's coming out of you. So
like,
it's hard
about it. when you think about it, like this as a female, when you're walking in the street and a man is like, oh wow, you're beautiful. Like they're not trying to get your number, they're not trying to holler, but they'll pass you by or you'll pass them and you be like, oh, you're beautiful. And you be like, oh, thank you, and you keep pushing. We could give them the same energy. Oh, you handsome. Oh, I like your outfit. Oh, you fly, and just keep it pushing. It don't necessarily got to be a whole. Oh, let me get your number. You got
Yeah.
But those little things, like I know for me, I'll go to the corner store looking crazy. You know what I mean? Head scarfed up, in my sweatpants, in my tee, like I'm comfortable. I'm in my own zone. They be like, oh, you cute. Oh, like, all right, thank you. You know what I mean? So it's kind of like we really need to stop and give these men the same type of energy. If you think a dude has a fly outfit, yo, you look really nice today. You never know what that dude is battling, and that little compliment just gave him a sense of, yo,
like a little pep in his step.
you know, now he walking a little different. His shoulders a little, so it goes, those little things goes a long way. We'd be surprised.
I agree with you.
Definitely. Janelle, I just want to reach back out to you. What are some of the resources that are available now, especially in the mental health kind of area, that are available for, for men at this time, and stuff that are, free or not, I guess free is good. Yeah, because that's a big deal nowadays.
I would say, for men in general, I think just also mental health in general, there's always free resources, right? And so whether you're checking local community centers to kind of find out where you can kind of get a therapist, right? Or even getting a therapist at a lower rate, right? You can always look at therapy for Black men. There's Soul Care for Black men. Those are two actually Instagram handles that actually cater to men, right? And talk about mental health in particular. And they actually feature therapists sometimes that are Black therapists that men can seek out and go to, and tips about it. Even down to, I'm trying to remember Aaron's handle right now, but I know even sometimes they're doing podcasts. He's doing podcasts.
The black therapist.
Yeah, the Black _ therapist, if I'm not mistaken, Aaron Miller. So like even him, like I know sometimes he'll do podcasts, and they're doing, if I'm not mistaken, recently he's done something called the Alpha Male and Beta Male, where he's been on some podcasts talking about some stuff. And so I think hashtags, right? Like as a man, if you're on social media, because you probably are, right? Think about hashtags, follow those hashtags, and kind of see what additional resources are happening that you can plug into. That's just on maybe a podcast, right? If you're not ready to go to therapy, I think that's also knowing like, where is this man at currently? Is he ready to go to therapy? Is he just contemplating, right? If you just want some more information when you get your feet wet, like just thinking about things like that, whether it's a podcast, whether it's subscribing to a podcast of a therapist, subscribing to a self-help book, right? Just trying to get your feet wet to understand language. I think just literally hashtagging Black therapists, right? And you'll see all the different Black therapists that are out there. I think if men are actually searching for a therapist, like using a website like Psychology Today and filtering out to just be black male, right? Or Black female, like whatever you're looking for in terms of services, using those search engines. There's a few different other sites that's not coming to me right now, but I can always send it to you guys in a list, because I have some of them listed.
We can link it. We can definitely link it in the caption.
I think it's important to find a therapist that kind of meets you where you are and like can understand what it is like. So it's important for them to be able to relate to you. Because I know for me, it was important for my therapist to relate to me. And I've actually had conversation with men in the past, and they're like, I don't want no woman therapist, or how could she help me? Like, she wouldn't understand what it is that I go through. So it's important. I'm glad that there's so many resources that are specifically for the Black man, or even just a man in general, that can just kind of focus on them the way that they are for women and women of color, of course, like postpartum, let's say, or you know what I mean? Like there's like therapists that kind of focus and specialize on certain things. So I love that there are so many resources nowadays for that.
I mean, and I'm gonna just play, I don't like this term, but I'm gonna play devil's advocate, and I'm gonna blow it but I'm gonna blow it back on us. And I know for me, I've asked my therapist, like, how do I do a better job at being able to be that support for the men in my life? You know what I mean? Growing up, my father did have several bouts with mental health, and like how do I be a better daughter? How do I make myself more available and more supportive, or create space? Because, you know, and Sassy mentioned this, we're constantly putting demands on other people, right? Or on the men in our lives. How do we even create space if they're not ready to go to therapy, that they're at least starting to start the conversations at home? Like beginning to put language to, like, you know, I missed you today, or I felt lonely today, and so I need this from you, right? So how do I do a better job to not be like, oh my God, you always, because that's typically the reaction. Like once we can become frustrated or we don't understand anything, something, where, you know, we're irate and we're screaming, and we already know that no one's responding to that, male or female. So once, how do I do a better job at creating space for my nephew, for my brother, for my father, for my man? How do I do a better job as a woman to create a safe space for the men in my life to be their best selves? And I definitely want to just, you know, Sassy, give you the floor too, to just talk about, like, how do we, even if there are men in our lives that we want to amplify or nominate, you know, I think the event that you put together is amazing. Like, how do we become more involved or more knowledgeable about even things like that? I'm sure there's probably other folks, maybe not in the New York area, who are doing some of the same things, but like, how do we, you know, get in there and really start celebrating these men? How do we show up for them, even the men we don't know, and clap as loud as we can for these men who have already been nominated in the community? You know, but that's just my thing. I just blow it back on us in the sense of like accountability. Like, yes, the ownership is on them, but we have a part to play too, to be better women, how we stand and how we walk this earth. And to your point, Stephanie, you were like, I mean, how often somebody say you look good, you don't even say thank you. You like, what? Like, you know what I mean? Like, we automatically like, why are you talking to me? We didn't say thank you, let alone, you know, they're like, oh, miss, have a nice day. You can't say have a nice day back. Like, we constantly are in this place of like defense and fight or flight mode, and everything is just this like, everything is coming from like, how do we level the playing field a little bit and just do a better job? We got to do better.
And it goes back to what you were saying, like when they say whatever, and you're like, oh, we're irate or whatever the case may be. We don't even have to be irate, but sometimes they'd be like, yo, can you just tell me you love me? Like, what bye? Like,
right?
Like we just dismiss them, like it's like, what are you talking about? But sometimes you got to take that for face value and be like, okay, maybe he's going through something, maybe he had a hard day, or maybe, you know what I mean? Like, let's not just dismiss it like it's nothing. Okay, baby, I love you. Like, okay, you know. As far as what's going on in the community, like as for me and what I do, like there's sponsorships that's always available, sponsorship package that people could sponsor into, and that is kind of like, and the event in itself is kind of like networking, right? So everybody who sponsors it is a small Black-owned business, and when you come, it's like a networking, and it's so funny because like I said, this is the third year that we're doing it, but from the first year, I've seen people who did it the first year who are now BFFs because they done connected with someone that they met at the event and did so many other events and stuff together. So it's really building each other up. It's really about just bigging up other people's brand. And as far as coming in or nominating, like after the Hustle Awards, like I'm automatically looking and for other people and for new people, men to honor the following year. And I put it out there. If you guys follow the page, like you'll see like when the opportunity comes to nominate a man, and it's like, just send me their profile and I'll stalk their whole life, see what they're about, see if it's a one-day thing or if this is who they really are, and then other than that, it's literally just getting a ticket and coming to the event. And it's a whole vibe. Like, and I don't say that because it's my event to host, but it's really so empowering and inspirational when you come and you just you hear these Black men speak or these men of color speak, and you hear all that they've done and all that they're doing in the community. And then you have your local artists who like come and sing, and they're bomb at their craft, whether it's spoken word, dancing, singing. So it's really it's just a whole vibe. So and I'm always down to like collaborate with other people who have ideas and who want to do stuff for everyone in the community, whether it's the kids, whether it's the men. But I'm definitely team men because they don't have enough. Like I said, they have Father's Day, and if you're not a father, you kind of miss the mark of being acknowledged in general. So Anything to do with the men or giving back, I'm here for it.
Yeah,
I love that.
that's good stuff.
Yeah,
I love it. I love it. Well, count us in. So,
Yes, then we're definitely in support of that. for
you know,
sure.
and definitely let the people know where they can follow both of you, where they can learn more about what you all are doing to amplify men of color, amplify, you know, women who want to, you know, be better for their men. Definitely let us know, Janelle, where we can find you.
Yeah, so you guys can find me at Simply Redefining. That's my Instagram handle. That's my Facebook handle. If you need to email me, my email is info@simplyredefining.com. And yeah, that's where you can locate me for therapeutic services, consultations, speaking. That's where you can find me.
Awesome. And what about you, Sassy?
I can be found on social media. Instagram. We have 2 pages, but it's Sassy SASSIE_FAENT. That's like our main page, and if you look in our bio, you'll see the other pages that we're affiliated with. And our information is there. Our phone number is there. So we're accessible. So
Awesome. And we will be sure to link those in the caption, both on YouTube and everywhere you listen to podcasts.
For sure. Thank you guys so much for coming on today's show and enlightening us on all the things that are happening and then your intake. I really, really appreciate both of you for even coming on. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.
All right.
All right, guys.